Thank you for having me. I'm always happy to share my understanding of Buddhism. And in an hour, I'll try to give you 2,500 years of wisdom and compassion. This, of course, would just be a thumbnail sketch, but hopefully after an hour or so, you'll have a good basis of understanding and interpreting some of the things you hear and read about Buddhism in America. I understand you're studying and learning about all different types of cultures and diversity and religions. And so I'll just start with the basics, and you can ask questions, as we go along. We'll have time later on for questions, and I thought we might do a little exercise in meditation so you have an experience of some of the things that we actually do. First of all, there was an actual human being, Siddhartha Gautama, a human 2,500 years ago in India, who was born and grew up in Hindu India. And I mention that because I'll refer back to that shortly. But he was born into a royal family. He was a prince and lived a very comfortable life, the kind of life we might imagine we might live if we won the lotto. So here's a person who had it made. And yet his father wanted him to be a great warrior and shielded him from a lot of the realities of everyday life. So he lived just a very princely life. He was married and had a small child. But he snuck out of the castle 4 times and saw 4 events. And this marked a serious question in his mind. He saw on each visit first a sick person, an old person, and a dead person in a funeral, and the monk. And speaking with his charioteer, he realized that all people can become sick. Those of us who are lucky can become old, and we all will die. And this 4th visit, he saw a monk, and he asked, what is that man doing? And his charioteer explained that was a person who was seeking truth. And so weighed down with these realities of what could happen to all of us, even those of us who might be living a very comfortable life, he set out to discover, why we as humans experience these conditions, some of which we may find, negative. And so you may know the story of Siddhartha Gautama renouncing his princely life, leaving his castle, leaving his clothes on one bank, just taking a robe, following 5 ascetics. And these were monks who were practicing the practices of that time to deprive themselves of any practical type of living. And so he followed them and practiced the things they were learning for 6 years. He mastered many things, meditation, really just living on very little, begging for food, doing all these very challenging achievements, and yet although he achieved these things, he didn't feel he was any closer to truth. And so he sat down under what has become known as a bo tree in Bodh Gaya, India. And it said that, and we use the date December 8th, it is said that he awoke that morning and realized truth, true reality. And so what Buddhism is about is the teachings that he taught after realizing this truth. And so what we'll explain is this understanding that he had. Now, to start off with, I'd like to know who I'm speaking with and to give you a sense of the context of what we're talking about. And to establish this context, I just wanted to know, here at Palomar, do you play football?
They do.
Okay.
It's a football team.
Yeah. Now, got a couple of questions on football to get a sense of how you understand that. How do you score goals here at Palomar football?
You run with the ball into the end zone.
Okay. Yeah.
If you make it touchdown.
Yeah.
Practice.
Yeah. Practice. And do you, in terms of the rules of the game, do you run more or pass more for these goals?
Pass.
More passing? Okay. Here, what is this thing about using your hands? Do you use your hands in football here?
Yeah.
You do? Okay. Do you, do your players play both offense and defense, or is it just one side? Both? Okay. Then you're running continuously. You don't stop and discuss what the next play will be in what's called a huddle?
They do.
It depends on the style of.
Okay. Are you getting the point of what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Football? When I say football, if I were to use that term throughout the world, most people will think of a game that we call soccer. Here in America, we use the term football and we think of, the Bolts,
Right.
and maybe the 49ers, I'm from up north. They didn't do so well this last weekend. But the point I'm getting to is that we have to understand the words and the context. And the word football has a different meaning in a different context. If we use the word football, most of us think of the quarterback, offense, defense, different teams, huddles, scoring, either touchdowns or field goals, things like that. Football in most of the rest of the world is known as playing, not touching the ball with your hands, running continuously, offense, defense, kicking the ball for a goal, and having scores like 2-3 rather than 47 to, I won't mention 0 or whatever. Maybe it was 37. Anyway, so the point I'm trying to make is that we often have something in our mind when we say a word, and then we kind of assume, we try to fit in what we're learning about this new sport. And it's similar with the term Buddhism, because we hear the term Buddhism and the Buddha and religion, and we have certain assumptions. And so what I want to establish is, what do we assume when we talk about religion in America? What are some of the primary things we,
the big fat guy, the bald guy that rub his belly.
Okay, well, that's a sense of Buddha, okay? And that actually is a Chinese god, but anyway, yeah. But what other term in religion do we have that we think religion's, like the rules of football? What are the principles?
It has to be a god of some sort.
Okay, usually a deity is involved. What other aspects? Faith, that there's a certain deep belief. Other things?
Rules.
Rules, okay, and what one must abide by rules. And if one doesn't, what happens?
Consequences.
Consequences. And where do the consequences come from?
The rules.
The rules, sometimes outside of us. Okay, so are there other things that we kind of ascribe to religion when we talk about it? Okay, now, so this is what I want to put down, that here we have something, as football, that we think we know a broad field, and we call it religion. And then we have the question, when we talk about Buddhism, sometimes we ask, is it a religion? Does it fit these kind of definitions? Or is it a philosophy, something that may be of the mind, cognitive, something we think about? Or is it a way of life, just the way people happen to live and may or may not have this deity or a set of rules? So we have questions like that. So I want to see if I could talk about Buddhism in a way that is contemporary and American, and yet give you the basics of the history of Buddhism, so that all this kind of fits in together, and to kind of clarify where we might be putting our thoughts of what Buddhism might be and how it fits and why it may not fit into our definition into these words. And words do have a limit. This is one reason Zen Buddhism, which many Americans are familiar with, uses no language. If you ask questions in Buddhism, the answer is usually sit. Sit in zazen, in this posture. And the thought there is that words detract from the actual experience of truth. Takes a long time, though, at times, and it's also hard on the body if you've ever sat. But anyway, we'll try that a little bit later. So the one other thing I want to bring up here is that often when we talk about religion, there's something that's supernatural. Is that right?
Yes.
That we have what we might call natural, and then religion tends to come in and it's supernatural. It's beyond what's usually expected, like life after death, or life recurring again from death. Now, basically, as I said, when the Buddha was enlightened, and we have this, again, dilemma of what the word enlightenment might mean. But someone passed by and he said, "Oh, sir, you look very august. You radiate, who are you?" And he replied, "I am the Buddha." And the word Buddha means awakened one. And so rather than putting it into our definition of religion, what Buddha and Buddhism may mean is that it's an awakening process. And process is very important because it gives a sense of a dynamic movement. And I had some questions from the class, and I'll try to incorporate that as we talk. And one of the questions is, what is non-self? And another one that comes in that kind of quickly follows that is, what are the points of good and evil? And so this awakening process, we come back to, what is it about, being good or not? And what I want to say about that is, in Buddhist thought, we have this term duality. Do people know what that means? Duality?
Yin and yang?
Yeah, in one sense. But also it means that however we think, there's an opposite. We as humans think in a dualistic way. What do you need to have up?
Down.
Down. In order to have a front, what do you need to have a back? In order to have an inside, you have to have an outside. So in order to have good, you need to have bad. In order to have life, you need to have death. So this term duality is something that we deal with all the time, and this is how we see things. And then we have these kind of mystical terms in Buddhism that emptiness is form, and form is emptiness. What does that mean? We'll try and explain this. If this is emptiness, can you see this white dot? How many? This is a college class. You're not seeing the white dot? Okay. Why aren't you seeing the white dot?
White on white?
White on white. Emptiness, emptiness, emptiness. What do we need to really establish emptiness?
Contrasted with black, maybe?
Yeah.
Or something?
Yeah. Yeah. A blue dot or something. So in order for emptiness to exist, there has to be a form. In order to have good, there has to be bad. So again, we can't really experience one without the other. So that is the term emptiness is form, form is emptiness, that we see things in dualistic forms. Now, what is it we often try to do with religion and how we live our lives? What's the basic model that all of us seem to have? And the question always comes up, what is the issue of good and evil? Anyone listen to Prairie Home Companion, Garrison Keillor? How does he end his show? All the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average. So we all want to be above average in being good, right? We may accept this good and bad, half and half, but we know that we're on the 51% good, and those other people are 49% bad. And in Buddhist thought, this is one of our dilemma, that we have things in a dualistic way. Not only dualistic, what is the critical point here is me and we, the self within the whole. And that the essence of Buddhism is to realize that I am and always have been part of the whole. And I have this little diagram to explain this. This is kind of how we see ourselves. And the reason I have a degree in transpersonal or spiritual psychology is that psychology is 100 years old or so. Transpersonal is this field of psychology, and it started with Jung and way back, but became a formal school in the 1970s. And when I first encountered it, I was very interested because it reflected Buddhist thought. Well, when the psychologists started studying beyond interpersonal, in other words, psychology we usually assign to how we interact with each other, humanistic, the third school of psychology. But this fourth branch became known as transpersonal, beyond the person, how we all, humans have always reacted and interacted with the spiritual realm. And that in order to understand psychology, they looked around and said, you know, there's this group of people that have been studying this for over 2,000 years. They're called Buddhists. And so they're using many Buddhist concepts. And so when I first encountered it, I thought, wow, this is very interesting. And it's a way that I found enabled me to talk and share about Buddhism in a way, in contemporary language, in ways that we're familiar with as Americans. And part of it is that as humans, we can't survive by ourselves. How did you make it through the first 5 years of your life?
Parents.
Parents. And others, yeah. You had food. Did you milk the cow? Pick the food? Somehow, things have supported us. And this is possible because people accepted us. So a primary concern in humans, and most mammals, I would think, is to be accepted. And so we learn as children how to smile and be, pleasant, but also how to be ornery and scream and yell and so forth. But primarily, we're learning to build our ego to be noticed, to realize we are separate from others, and realizing that if we don't behave in a certain way, we may not be accepted. And so much of our lives are about being accepted. Think about where we are now, in your life. So much of it is about being accepted. And these are, of course, residual and very important traits that we learn. But as adults, we find something else, that these habits that we've developed as children become hindrances. And there's a whole thing about shadow, and any psychology majors here? We won't get too much into that, but anyway, there's a whole way of understanding the psyche, the way we behave as humans, and how this fits into psychological thought and Buddhist thought. But this essence of being accepted is very important. And so in Shin Buddhist thought, and I'll explain what I'm talking about there, we have practices where we understand that we have always been within the whole. That as children, we feel that we were outside of that we have to be accepted, that we have to achieve something. And yet, in schools of Buddhism, we realize that we have always been part of the whole. So let me, now, we'll get into some deep philosophical thought, and I'll try to keep it, basic. Understanding truth is one thing, all these things I'm talking about. Do I have any questions right now on this, this thought about the self and the whole? Okay, I'm glad everyone understands everything very clearly. The next thing, the question that seems to come up is this thing about belief. What do we Buddhists believe in? And if it's belief, we can think of believing of things like gravity. How many people believe in gravity? Seems like one guy, Walinda, I don't know if he believes in gravity. He walked across the wire in Chicago. Yeah. I don't know. I believe in gravity, so I wouldn't do that. But there are two things that the Buddha talked about, and it has to do with belief, I guess, but it has to do more with something we experience. And that is, there are what he called three aspects of life, of existence. And one is interdependence, and that is that everything's connected, that nothing exists independent of any other thing. Now, you have to realize he talked about this 2,500 years ago, and the Earth was flat. And now, of course, our scientists are telling us everything is connected, and we know about atoms, molecules, all of this. So from a scientific point of view, we've come to understand this a little more clearly. The other thing he talked about was impermanence. And the everyday word for this is everything changes. Does anything not change? Come on in and grab some seats. The lucky ones get to sit up front. But Yeah, impermanence just means that nothing stays the same, everything changes. So is this something we can believe in, like gravity?
Yes.
Okay. So there are these two things that anchor Buddhist thought, that everything's connected, everything changes. And if that's true, what about the self? We're concerned with the self, right? You're going to have to take a test, pass this class, take other classes, get a degree, get a job, so forth. Now, if everything's changing and we're all connected, do we have to worry about this? I think if we're honest, we do. And that there is this thought that I am separate and I need to do something. And this is true. We do have to do things to survive and live in this world. But these two principles of being connected with everything else and that everything changes is a very primary truth to hang on to see if we're living our lives. And the point of the Buddhist teaching is not so much being good or bad. It's about whether we are in line with these realities so that we don't suffer and we are happy. It's about joy. It's about being happy. What happens if you don't follow rules? Driving, I see people, weaving in and out of traffic, and I hear about traffic accidents. People not making a curve or coming off an off ramp and jumping the rail and so forth. If we don't follow certain rules, there are certain consequences. And so basically all Buddhism is saying is that there are certain things that happen in life, things being connected, things changing, and if we don't follow these things, then it's a matter of us being happy or unhappy. So the practice in Buddhist thought is that this is how we live. It's to train and condition the mind out of illusion, trying to think of ways how our thinking may be off-centered to what is how life really works. Now, can I have any questions with that? Everyone's getting everything. Great. So it's basically, that's the essence, that things are changing, what we're dealing with the self. I'll get down to practical, everyday kinds of things, but this is kind of the theoretical basis. And one more thing before we get into real practical things. Truth. What's true reality? I asked about football. What might be a definition of true reality? That's a hard term. So what the Buddha gave as an example of truth was that each of us describes truth a certain way. Now, I have here, where is the front of the earth? Okay, what are you seeing over here? And what are you seeing on this side? I guess the ocean.
I think true reality is what we are living ourselves. My reality is not the same as somebody else.
Right. So that's the Buddhist point on true reality. That one of the problems we have is that we think if I see true reality and I'm seeing it from this point, all you people are not seeing true reality quite, correctly. This is the correct way. And yet what the Buddha said was that our view of reality is like 6 blind men describing the truth of an elephant. Now, I have the truth. I think the truth is like a rope. And some other people are saying, no, it's like a tree trunk. The truth of the elephant is like a spear, like a snake, no, a big leaf. No, it's a broad wall. Each blind man is explaining the truth, thinking that's the whole thing. And what the Buddha is saying is that each of us, and if there are 7 billion humans right now, each of us has a different view of reality. And this is why Buddhists, I think, are very respectful of other religions, of other people, that we honor the different opinions and thoughts of others because we know this is how we are as a human race. That each of us, each animal, each plant, all of us shares this whole process in a different way. The difficulty is in the human element in wanting to see it our way and making everyone else see it our way. So that will be our, basically the definition of truth, in that we're not fighting others to have others believe we have a truth. And each time Buddhism has gone from country to country, from India, Southeast Asia, all throughout those countries, going north, Tibet, down the Silk Road, actually into Iraq, Iran, and then the Silk Road through China, Korea, Japan, now to Europe and America, Hawaii and America, North America, South America. What it's done is not dominated or taken over indigenous religions. It's kind of accepted other religions and has offered these truths of Buddhism. And therefore you have many different forms of Buddhism, each kind of conforming to the customs and the indigenous religion of the place. And so there are flavors of Buddhism throughout the throughout the world. And so we're not so concerned with which flavor is the right one, but that there are many different ways. We have a great advantage here in America, in 21st century America, in that for the first time, all the different schools of Buddhism are kind of available to us. From Tibet, India, Southeast Asia, we have all these different forms. And so there are many various practices, and the practices are about shifting the mind, aligning it to what's true and real. Everything changes, we're interconnected. And so the different schools often just kind of exemplify a certain way of getting there. So it's the path. These practices are a path to truth. So let's see. I've been talking a long time. There must be some questions on. Yes.
So, because there are different, well, depending on the region,
Mhm.
location, there's a different form of Buddhism. Does that mean that the true reality that a Buddhist in America sees is going to be vastly different from a Buddhist in like India or?
Not vastly different. They conform, and I'll get to everyday kind of language, but it has to do with interconnectedness, compassion. Meaning that we're all together. We're all interrelated. Nothing I do will not influence what you do. Nothing you do, or anything you do will influence what I do. And the same is true across the world. When something's happening across the world, it affects us. We may not think it does, but it does. And so that everything changes and we are interconnected. Yeah, those are principal points. The practices themselves may look different, whether it's chanting, the ritual, so forth. Yes?
I'm sorry, I missed you said there's 3 aspects of life and I only got independent and
Okay, the third, it's sometimes called the third and fourth, but it's this whole thing about the self, okay? And often you hear this term, Buddhism talks about life as suffering. That's just part of this third aspect, okay? Is that life is suffering and life is nirvana. And so this would be a good time to look at this chart. Have you heard of the Four Noble Truths? This is basic to Buddhism. And the Buddha was called the first physician in that he felt that there was a problem. And what we need to do initially is find the diagnosis. What is the problem? And here we have dukkha, and the definition of dukkha just means that it's an off-centered axle wheel. In other words, you have a wheel and an axle hole, and if it's off-centered, the wheel gives you a bumpy ride. So dukkha means that we're off-centered, and life isn't going as smoothly as we would like. And it's been interpreted as suffering or discomfort, disillusionment, something like that. Now, if we have a problem, what's the cause? And he felt the cause is ignorance, greed, and hatred. And this is where the self, the individual comes in, the ego self. That it's when we think that we are separate, that we are better than the other person, and we don't like them, there's hatred. Or we want more than others, that's greed. Ignorance is just either knowing and not doing well or not knowing at all. But this is the cause of our suffering. But he also said, and I put it in this quadrant form. You can see this little well-worn chart. I should get into a PowerPoint. Usually the third is nirvana, and then this fourth is down. Usually it's in a linear fashion, but I put it this way because nirvana balances the suffering, and nirvana is the extinction of dukkha. It's centered. It's bliss. This is kind of what we think of as the world we would like to inhabit. And the way to this point is the Eightfold Path. And this is, before it was, the definitions were often written right views, thoughts, etc. Now we're using the term wholesome, being whole, holistic. Wholesome views, thoughts, speech, conduct or action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and meditation. So these are things that we can do to reach this. The reason I put it in this form is that our rules should complement each other. And the thought often is that, gee, I'm in here, I know I have problems, and this is where I want to be. And once I'm here, once I'm in this enlightened state, things will be fine. How does that fit in with impermanence, that things change?
You change.
Yeah. So how long are you going to stay in this state?
Not that long.
Not that long. And so I like to put it in here. And what are, this is the 51%. We want to be on the 51% here and 49 here. But this middle path that the Buddha talked about was central to his teaching was that we must balance things. And often we don't like to balance things. We want to get rid of this negative side and wonder why we continue to have problems when we can't get rid of that negative side. And what the Buddha is saying, it's always a balance. And where is this line? It depends on each of us, and it changes with so many different things. But it is this whole idea of balance, because everything changes, and we're all connected, so we're in a dynamic flow. And so what we're doing in our practice is adjusting the mind to fit into this, and learning to live a life that reflects this attitude. And I'll get into Shin Buddhism, which does this primarily in everyday life. So this is called the Four Noble Truths. And our point is that we're in a point of balance here rather than just staying here. Doing all these things, I reach this point. What happens when you reach the top of a mountain? Get up to Mount Everest. You reach the top.
Nowhere else to go but down.
Right. And so we have to update our thinking from illusion to reality. Can't stay up there very long. And there are many paths. Well, there are a few paths up there, but anyway, there are many paths up to the top of the mountain, but it's not just to stay up there, it's to come down. And to see life again from a different point of view. So it is to shift. I'll just use this little gimmick. We often go through life using these binoculars and wondering why life doesn't work well. And basically we're saying, oh, maybe it's our view that is not correct. And unfortunately, it goes against how our childhood tendencies have developed so that we survive. But the Buddhist form is that we enlarge ourselves so that we can see others. Now let me have questions again before I get into yes.
So I'm just trying to understand, is that the ultimate goal of Buddhism, is to have the balance between nirvana and dukkha, or is it more like eternal life, or is it the balancing?
Great. Again, what is the popular sense in Buddhism of what's the most important sense of time? Maybe I'll cheat and just tell you. You may have heard that it's the here and now, be here now. So in Buddhism, it is the now. If everything's changing, you have an eternal life, what's the most important point? Often we talk about eternal life. If my life is like this now, for this 100 years, if I'm lucky, I have eternity to worry about. The Buddhist thought is it's here and now, right now. Now, my question on eternal life, my mother passed away last year. She was 100 years and 9 months. She led a very good life. She was very vibrant and healthy, but of course diminished near the end. And I'm wondering, if we have this concept of eternal life, is she going to live eternal life at 100 years? She was physically pretty incapacitated then. Her mind was kind of foggy. It would have been nice, maybe if at 75. I would like to, maybe I would have liked to have died at 30. I was in pretty good shape then. In my eternity, I could have been physically fit. And so what is this afterlife about? We're basing our whole human life on this afterlife. The question comes up in Zen, what was your face before you were born? We talk about the soul living in eternity. What was your eternity before you were born? Well, grandfather, great-grandfather, etc. But again, the thought in Buddhist thought is we have here and now, we have an experience of the here and now, right now. And this is what's most important. So this is a good way to shift into Shin Buddhism, which is Jodo Shinshu, the particular school I represent. First of all, to clarify some other things, much of what you hear about Buddhism, like the big fat person, I think that's an invention in Chinatown to sell these little statues. But there are many things that have come to America and we've just kind of adopted it. But he's one of the 7, I think, Taoist gods, and he's one of the gods of happiness. And somehow it got popular to rub his stomach or whatever, and you get good luck. And there's often, there are cultures where good luck is a big deal, and prayers. What Buddhism is about, well, I'll save this a little bit later on prayers, petition, and not praying. But anyway, to get something clear, when the Buddha was born 2,500 years ago in India, what he recommended to others who were interested in achieving this was to follow his path. And so he was a model of one form of Buddhism. Now we call that form Theravada. It's not really clear if you want to get technical, but we call it the school of elders. But it's when you renounce your ordinary life, shave your head, give up your clothes, wear one robe, have a begging bowl, don't eat one meal a day before noon, etc., study, meditate, and so forth. And so often, the question, are you vegetarian, why do you kill ants, so on and so forth. What we have as a model is this monk, someone who's really trying to rid himself of this attachment to self. So that is one path. 400 or 500 years later, another branch of Buddhism formed called Mahayana, and this is probably more well-known, and it's called the greater vehicle. So rather than one person becoming enlightened, we have stories and a model of what's called the bodhisattva. And this is a being that stops and just about to become a Buddha and says, I will not become enlightened, I will not become a Buddha until all other beings are also enlightened, are also free of suffering. And so we have a different model. And this model is that if we're all interconnected, I'm not going to be the only one to be enlightened and enjoy this bliss. Everyone else will. And this is one reason why the historical Buddha taught for the next 45 years. He sat in bliss for 49 days and thought, this is kind of cool. But he realized there are others out there suffering, and so he taught in many different ways to have people understand this truth. One way is to become a monk. Another way is an ordinary working person's way. And the school of Buddhism that I represent is called Jodo Shinshu. Originated in Japan 800 years ago in 13th century Japan. And at that time, for some reason, Buddhism went down to the masses. Before then, the older schools of Buddhism, Buddhism had entered Japan in around the 6th century. And there were many schools, but they were all kind of for the elite, for people who could read, who could study, who had the financial or material wealth to really understand this. And in the 13th century, great religious leaders arose. Dogen and Zen, Shinran, there's Nichiren, Honen. All these people, for some reason, showed up, and several schools of Japanese Buddhism began. And it went from being a very elitist religion to the masses. And when it went to the masses, it went to people who were butchers, fishermen, who had to kill for a living, farmers, peasants, people who couldn't read, And it was following another line of thinking. And what I want to explain now is the difference between a lot of questions that are asked about, whether we eat meat or, do right things or wrong things. Our founder, Shinran, was a monk for 20 years. But his great gift was that he was honest. And what he said was that although he looked very pious and was highly regarded among monks, said that he could not get rid of his desires. And that still he was thinking of himself, he could not be all compassionate, all these things. So as a monk, he was following certain rules. And yet he felt because he could not, that he could no longer be a monk. And so he gave up that, and he followed another monk who had just started a new school, and this man was called Honen. This is when it was coming down to the masses. And Shinran read the same sutras that his teacher did and other teachers before him. We always have a lineage of scholars and monks where the teachings come from the Buddha down. But Shinran read it in a particular way. And I think it makes sense to us if I explain it this way, that what he was talking about, his awakening and his enlightenment, was not really due to anything he did. It was nothing he was able to achieve. If you think of whatever career you're going into, think of being the top person in that field. Or if there are any runners, think of being a marathoner. And then think of being an Olympic level marathoner. This is what it means kind of to be a Buddha, to be a monk and to achieve something. You have to be at the top of the game. Not only that, you need to be at the top of your game in every field, music, science, literature, all these things. Now, can we achieve that? Shinran said no. And what he realized that what is happening all the time is that we're receiving things. I mentioned the first 5 years of our life. We have been receiving things all along. And somehow we've missed it. Woe is me, life is not working. And what he realized was that if we see things not out of illusion, but if we look at it accurately, we are always receiving things. So this school of Buddhism called Jodo Shinshu, in America we have shortened it to Shin, S-H-I-N, is that we have been receiving things, but we've been ignoring that. And so our practice is really acknowledging what we have received. And so the way I've been talking about this in contemporary America is that it's moving from this attitude of please, wanting something we don't have, to thank you. And this is why often you'll see, if you come to our services, you hear Namo Amida Butsu, you see people in this position called Gassho. And it often looks like it's a petition or prayer. And we say in Buddhism, we don't pray. We're not looking for a future something that will benefit us. What we're looking at is what we have received. And so it's this whole thought in anything you might read if you're interested in Buddhism or listen to, is that it's not about achieving, it's about realizing what we have received. And the way to do this on a day-to-day basis is to realize whether you're saying, please, I want something I don't have, or thank you, I acknowledge things that I do have. And the practice in Shin Buddhism as everyday working people, people who may have jobs, even as butchers or working at a meat plant or whatever, fishermen, is that we do take life. Even as ordinary people, we may not take life personally, but if I'm eating bacon and eggs, I'm at the effect of that, or I'm the result of others doing that. And so it's acknowledging what we do all the time, just in living a healthy life. We hear about this Ebola. We're healthy and relatively, most of us are in good health because of all the science improvements, defeating, what used to kill many children and adults in years past. So to be alive takes life. And we're out of this system of good or bad and placing in whether we're awake or not, whether we actually appreciate what we have instead of requesting things that we don't have. So it's a shift from please to thank you. And the practice, everyday practice, is based on that. So, questions on that? Yes.
So you say like appreciating what we have and thank you every day is kind of the philosophy, the main philosophy,
Yeah.
or the main practice.
Yeah,
or
this is a simplified form, okay?
This is through meditation.
Yes, we'll get into meditation in just a bit. But the reason I put it this way is I'm giving you a 1-hour talk on Buddhism. If I gave you a 1-hour talk on some of the principles, your eyes would be even more glassy than they might be right now. But we do understand what please means, and we do know what thank you means. And it's every day. It's around us all the time. And we wonder why our life isn't working. You know, I've got this junky old car. I want another one. I'm not paying attention to the guy who doesn't have a car. You know, our life is filled that way. We compare our lives to, this last year, our temple remodeled our main floor. The building was built in 1930. We had to do it to be compliant. It's called the Kitchen Compliance Project because the kitchen was 78 years old. But anyway, and some things aren't quite the way we might have liked them. But if we compare it to how it was, it's great. The other thing we have to look at is our lives, although it may seem like it's not the way we want it, is far better than those people living in the 1930s. That was the Depression era. How did they build that building with the income they had? They were laborers, you know, fishermen, farmers, whatever. And yet they donated a good portion of their income to have this temple built. And so again, just looking at our lives in this building we have here, I don't know if we hear about Abe Lincoln reading, learning, you know, by candlelight and all these things. So on a material basis, our lives are so much better. But it's our minds that, you know, make us poorer. And so what we're looking at is life itself. And when we can shift and appreciate what we have, then it really makes our life much better. And what that does is it helps us see other things that we enjoy. And then I'll kind of round this out because the thing that follows this awakening, and everyone wants to be in this awakening era. Let me just talk about the image of the Buddha first, and then I'll kind of close this up, and then we'll get into some practice. People ask about the image of the Buddha. And if you go to temples, often you see a statue of a Buddha either standing or sitting. Or in our temple, we have a statue, a picture, or these Chinese characters, Namo Amida Butsu, but this human figure. And one of our masters said that the best image is the Chinese characters, Namo Amida Butsu. That, in a sense, it has various meanings. It is an experience of being one with all and appreciating that I acknowledge and appreciate, give gratitude that I am included within this dynamic process called life. But the image is in human form because we relate to human. There's a German psychologist, Martin Buber, who said that as humans, we relate to a human figure. It's hard for us to say, I am one with, you know, the universe. But if we have a human figure, we can relate to that. Why? Because often we use in Japanese terms, the thought of the love of a mother, the unconditional love of a mother, compassion. This is a description of the Buddha. So anyway, so we're not there, we honor, but we're not worshiping a figure. It's just that this human figure is easier for us to realize that we have received compassion from so many other things. And then to bring it back to Shin Buddhism, the next step after awakening is what? If you received the gift from someone, what do most of these billionaires do now?
Give back.
Give back. So if we're really awake, we realize that we have received all these things. The next step is to be really happy we share that. And so it is this conduct, actions, service to others in helping them wake up or just to help make their lives better. So that is how the cycle continues. Interdependence, everything changing. And that we just don't sit there and say, I made it, I'm enlightened, I'm going to have a blissful life. No, it's to go out there and share. And we see that as we do that, our lives become happier. You know, materially, lots of things could happen. And yet, this is what Shin Buddhism is about. So it's this enlightenment, and I don't use the word enlightenment very often. I like to use the word awakening, because I don't know what enlightenment means. I've never been there. I don't know too many people who have. But I've been awake. I wake up every morning, and I'm happy I'm waking up. And then I get sleepy and I fall asleep. And then I wake up. So it's this continual process of waking up and realizing, oh, look at all the things I have rather than things I don't have. So I'll kind of end this portion with this thought of Shin Buddhism especially, and this is one school, but many schools reflect this attitude. It's to appreciate what we have, to balance the desire for things that we don't have. It's not just to be thank you, thank you, thank you, let me give you all I have. It's to balance this desire for things that I don't have. I'm unhappy, I have illusion, because I will always want things that I don't have, especially in America. You know, our economy is based on what we don't have. You have an Apple V? Oh, last year's stuff. Oh. You know. It's based on wanting something we don't have. And so to summarize what I've been saying is that I appreciate what I have to balance the desire for things I don't have. And that's not only material things, that's relationships and others. And again, this, there's so much more that we could get into, but that's kind of a less than 1 hour talk on this thought. So questions to this point? Yes?
What is it like as you educate children?
Mm-hmm.
Because especially here where
Right.
material
Mhm.
belongings are
Right.
so valuable,
Mhm.
how do you teach children the difference between
Right.
appreciating what they have and then wanting?
I think it's doing all the things that we do, but the emphasis is on this acceptance, being accepted just as we are. And yet our society, you know, there always will want more and will want to be better and grow, and so that will be there. But just to have the child feel comfortable and heard for who they are. What we have, and again, this is psychological terminology, but there's something called the sacred wound or the primal wound. And this means that as infants or children, or as we grow, we did not experience being seen as we wanted to be seen. We have what's called the platinum rule. The golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The platinum rule, which reflects more Buddhist thought, is do unto others what they would want to have done unto them. In other words, if you want my favorite dessert, I'll tell you what I want. I may not want your favorite dessert. Do you see what I mean?
Could you say that one more time, the platinum rule? How does
Well,
that-
it's just, I'm not even sure if I say it correctly, but do unto others, do unto others as they would want to have done unto them. I don't know if that's grammatically correct or not. But so the other thing with children, you know, having them feel comfortable in who they are, is to ask in any event or activities they do, instead of saying, oh, you know, yeah, how's your baseball game? You know, did you hit the ball? Oh, that's okay. You lost. Da da da. The thing with children is to say, how was that for you? How did that feel? Oh, you missed the ball. How did that feel? They begin to own that it's okay to miss a ball, to strike out, to hit a home run. It's how did that feel? Not that, oh, this is, you know, judged on some criteria of other players. But this, how does it feel, kind of gives them ownership. Because that's what we always want to express. And you'll probably see it in movies and reflect on our own lives that, you know, you did something and you wanted to be acknowledged a certain way, and someone acknowledged something else that was good, but not what you wanted to hear. And so it is to affirm each of us in the way we want to be affirmed. So those are just a couple of ideas. Any other questions? I thought at this time we might do a little meditation, but before we all fall asleep, why don't we all stand up?
Okay.
and stretch your, yeah. You just might want to stretch, yeah. Just get a sense of your body, yeah. Okay, everybody awake? Yeah. Okay, have a seat, and let's see, I guess I could. How many people have meditated before? Okay, good. Then you can either listen to me or do your own style. And this is just, there are many different ways of meditating and objectives and so forth, but this is just a simple way for people who have not done so. And I want to get your input after we do this. And we'll just do this for a few minutes. But one thing we're doing is that we're trying to integrate everything, you know, the mind. And also, if you're interested in Buddhism and you read, you'll see mind, M-I-N-D, often. You know, the mind is this, mind is that. What it means in Eastern thought is heart-mind. So it's not just the cognitive how we think, it's how we feel and think, heart-mind. And so with meditation, it is an integration of the mind, the heart, the body, and the spiritual, all these things. And I think in our lives in America, we learned that it's very good to be active, and we're always active, and we're thinking, and so on and so forth. And I don't know if there's been very much in terms of quieting and just kind of being one with everything. And so this is what this can lead to. And again, this is just the initial experience. But yeah, if you could sit away from the back of your chair, and maybe I'll sit a little sideways so you can see. And if you could put your feet kind of flat on the floor, maybe about that far apart, and then put your hands maybe on your lap this way, or if you want up, or if you have a posture of meditation, go ahead. And the principal idea is to have your back straight. It doesn't have to be rigid, but think of a string tied to the top of your head, floating with a balloon up toward the sky. So your face is kind of held upright, and you're looking straight ahead. And then just think of everything kind of relaxing around that your spine is erect, not real stiff. And think of everything relaxing around there. And you might just kind of feel your neck tighten, relax, your shoulders tighten, relax, your arms tighten, relax. Tighten your chest, relax. Tighten your stomach, relax. Your buttocks, relax. Your thighs, and your legs, and your feet, tighten it, relax. And just very naturally take a deep breath, and then exhale. And your face is still looking straight ahead, and you might allow your eyes to close, not all the way, but almost all the way closed. And so if your face is looking straight ahead and your eyelids are almost closed, you'll probably see an area in front of you, maybe 6 or 8 feet, or the desk or something like that. And what this technique does of kind of an open eye meditation is it keeps us connected with the outside. So we're reflecting with the darkness of our eyelids inside, and yet we're connected with the outside, and we can sense, you know, what is happening out there. And then just very naturally, breathe in, and you might breathe in through your nose, and then exhale through your mouth. Inhale through your nose, and exhale through your mouth. Now, this is an opportunity to just get a sense of your experience of yourself, your posture, and everything around you. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And you might find that your mind is working feverishly. To have some sense of control, just count your breaths. Inhale 1, exhale 1. Inhale 2, exhale 2. And just count your breathing until you reach 10, and then begin again. And you may find that you have trouble reaching 10, but that's fine. And I'll be quiet just for a few minutes, and I'll start with the ringing of a bell, and I'll end with the ringing of the bell. And in that time, just experience this for yourself. So breathing in through your nose very naturally, and exhaling naturally, counting from 1 to 10, and beginning again. So I'll hit the chimes and we'll begin. I'll hit it again in just a few minutes to bring you back. Okay, begin. Very slowly get a sense of the chair, the floor, and at your own pace, open your eyes and bring your attention back to the room. Okay. How was that?
Relax.
Relaxing. Peaceful. Yeah. Any discoveries?
My heartbeat is very loud and annoying.
Got to quiet it down.
Yeah, I try to tell it to do that, but it won't listen.
So there are some things that go on without our control and for our benefit. The heart is, you might say, thank you, heart. You're a little noisy, but thank you.
It's quite annoying, but thank you.
Other thoughts?
I have a racing brain, so my
Yeah.
mind just would, and I kept
Yeah.
thinking, no, just focus on your breathing, as my brain was going in all sorts of different directions.
Yeah, so we find that we're thinking, yes.
So this is like a training your brain to kind of have a harmony. That's
Mhm.
what it is.
Yeah.
And how long it takes if you have to practice every day?
What I recommend, if you're serious about doing this, is what I recommend is 1 minute.
1 minute every day.
Yes. And this is part of actually Shin thought, Morita, this method. And it's that we often make promises to ourselves that we're going to exercise 20 minutes a day. And we're going to do this and do that. And we sometimes don't, go past a week. But if you take things in very small increments, 1 minute, and if that becomes a habit every day, then you might up it to 2 minutes. And this is what I say in our school as far as thank you. Find one thing every day that you can say thank you to, actually consciously. And then when you find that becomes a habit, you find 2 things and 3 things. And what we're doing is shifting our focus from what we don't have to what we have. And it really opens up our lives to appreciate things. And it makes our lives happier. Joy is an important word in our teachings. Great joy is often said. But, anyone else hear the mind going or parts of the body? I got the itch here. Or, yeah.
I felt disconnected of the world,
Mhm.
and suddenly the whole classroom became very silent.
Yeah.
And somehow I feel like we were kind of focused and trying to earn.
There's a power when people get together. In Zen, there's a morning, afternoon, evening zazen. People sit together. You can do it at home, but then there's kind of a power when you're doing it together. In our school, and most schools have chanting. When we get together and chant together, people wonder what this chanting is about. It is an activity of oneness, of hearing and singing, chanting with others, the right tone, the volume, so forth. But it's a practice of being one with the others. So in Buddhism, you may hear, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma. The Dharma is truth or the teachings, the truth behind the teachings. And I take refuge in the Sangha. The Sangha used to mean a community of monks and nuns. Now it just means followers of the Buddha. In America, that's how we use the term Sangha, our congregation, the community. And so it is, our particular school of Buddhism is not monastic. And so I'm married, I have kids, I had a job. I just had a little more schooling and ordination practices in Shin Buddhism. But anyway, it is in being with the community of others. So I like to say in our school, we have an upstairs sanctuary we call the hondo, the altar, pews and so forth. And then the main floor, which is kind of the second floor because we're on a hill. But anyway, that's where we have the kitchen, dining room, conference room. That's where we live Shin Buddhism. It happens in the kitchen. So we get quiet, we get very spiritual, chant and so forth. And then we go downstairs and we talk and we act like real people. And that's what Shin Buddhism is about. People ask what it's about eating, community, yeah. And so we do have fun and we say, oh, I shouldn't be saying these bad words, and oh, I'm talking bad about so-and-so, and yeah, that's who we are. But it's shifting it's not, being saintly. That's one thing. We don't have the Buddha so much as a guide. It is a guide, but we know we're not at that level. But we can reach the same awakening just by appreciating what we have and realizing what we call the compassion of Amida. The term Amida, this particular Buddha, translated means light and life. What on this planet does not have light or life? Sometimes it's called Gya. The whole planet is alive. Glaciers move, forests grow and disappear, mountains grow. So light and life, also wisdom and compassion. So what we're saying in Namo Amida Butsu is not please, but thank you, I awake, that I am one. Somehow I was born. If you look at the whole solar system, we've got billions of stars, billions of galaxies apparently, probably billions of planets. Somehow I got lucky and I was born on this one. Somehow I made it in this last century where we have running water, indoor plumbing, electricity. And somehow I made it to San Diego where the weather is always 70 degrees. So these are the things we look at. And then what do I do when I wake up to this? I serve others. So, yes?
What are there certain holidays that you observe?
Yes. We have one holiday I should mention is Ohigan. And, well, there are a lot of things. Anyway, we celebrate this. It's the equinox in the fall and spring. And often you'll have religious traditions celebrating the peak of summer and the depth of winter. We have two celebrations. Ohigan means, anyway, it's the equinox, when the day and night is equal. And that, again, reflects balance. And I say it must be special because we celebrate it 2 times a year. Mm-hmm. Most holidays are once a year. But again, it was a time historically when the monks were able to study. It didn't have the oppressive heat of summer or the cold of winter. And it was an ideal time to study. The day the Buddha was born. And then it goes between whether it's the lunar or solar calendar we're using. But anyway, the day of the Buddha's death. We have the founder, our founder, Shinran, born in May, passed away in, well, now we celebrate it or honor it in January. It used to be November, the lunar calendar. But anyway, there are certain dates. And again, things change with cultures. We're so busy now. Celebrations used to be in a little village, and there's certain ways to honor these things. And because we're in such a diverse culture and a time where time is valuable and people live so far apart, customs have changed. To give you an idea of something else, if you were to come to our temple and many temples, you see a very ornate altar. That was to represent this pure realm. And often the term born in the pure land or pure realm was meant as an afterlife. And we have all these things, the petition, better life, afterlife, and all these things are here. I like to interpret things in a contemporary way. And this is what Buddhism has always done. When it's gone from country to country, the Chinese said, hey, what is this thing about not eating meat? The Hindus didn't eat meat, but we Chinese have to. It's cold. We can't run around with one shoulder bare. And so customs changed as it went from country to country. So here we are in America, in 21st century America, in a digital age, when things were taught when the earth was flat and things were much different. And so, as I said, in those days, things only got better after you died. If you were a peasant, you knew that your grandchild would have the same life that your grandfather had. There was no moving up in society. But it would get better after you died, and so we had these descriptions. So the altar often is gold and very elaborate. The sutras talk about flowers and birds and so forth, because this was an imagery of how this nirvana might be. In some of our modern temples, in Berkeley, for instance, where else but Berkeley, There's a simple wall, a simple shelf, and the statue of the Buddha. So for us in 20th or 21st century America, this pure realm is simplicity. Yeah. And so it is just of the mind. And I call it a pure realm. And this birth is now interpreted to mean an awakening, a spiritual awakening. And I take that to mean that I realize that there is a spiritual component to me, that it's not just afterlife, but it is this continuum, that somehow I was born as a human being in this continuum from eternity past to eternity future. I'm not basing my life on eternity future so much as the now. And if I'm really awake, the only thing I can realize is that I'm only here because of the causes and conditions of all others. Light and life, wisdom and compassion. I'm here because of everything else. And because of that, I'm just motivated, moved to share this with others. And so this is a basis of Buddhist thought. Everything's integrated, interdependent, changing, and the now is important. So what I do for others is an example of my awakening. Other questions on that might be on the test? See if I answered most.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Theravada.
Do you guys believe in incarnation?
No, see, again, that was more of a Hindu thought. Again, in Hindu India, you didn't eat cows or things because, like here, if you die, where will you go? Right? Oh, heaven or hell. It's kind of an American thought based on probably Christian thought and many other thoughts. In the Buddhist realm, there are 6 realms, but it's all in the present realm. We're sometimes animals, we're sometimes gods, we're sometimes, beggars. We have a realm called the hungry ghosts, which means we have an insatiable appetite. But anyway, all these realms are kind of mental and they're now. And they're put kind of as an afterlife event. But the way I describe this, we have this term of, in our school, mythical stories, that we're here because of this particular Buddha. A bodhisattva made these promises that we would all be awakened. And the way I like to explain it is it's evolution. He worked for 10 kalpas. A kalpa is an eon, indescribable amount of time. Well, how long did it take us to be here on this earth? They say, well, apparently the Big Bang is 14.5 billion years old. Okay. Now, what if, and we have this thing called evolution that I think most of us believe in, that we came from other lower life forms. I'm a biology major, so yeah, there's this whole thing. Now, what if the Buddha was saying, yes, see those animals out there, we came from that, and they came from lesser life forms, and they came from a massive biological ooze. Would anyone listen to him? But if he gave this story, anyone see The Life of Pi, the movie? Okay, what does he say at the end? He's in this boat with this tiger, the chimpanzee, whatever, all right? He says, well, I could have said it's my mother and so, but it's kind of a boring story. But when you hear about this other thing, we kind of pay attention. Well, I think that's what happened 2,500 years ago and 800 years ago. If you said, well, we come from these lower life forms, you say, are you kidding me? This guy's kind of crazy. And you say, oh, in the distant past, this prince, they're always kings. This king renounced his life and became a bodhisattva and finally became Amida Buddha. Oh, okay, I got that. And now here we are in 21st century saying, well, that sounds kind of, evolution. We have, fossil evidence of this and that. So it's just the way we explain things.
Any other questions? Well, Kenji, we so much appreciate your wisdom and all of the information that you had to share.
Thank you.